Hello, my name is Joshua Keith, and this is theburningcoal.com, a website dedicated to God's glory, His grace, and our response to it. Today we're going to look at a Monday motivation, and we're going to be looking at having a pure heart. Again, this comes from the Beatitudes, and Jesus in Matthew 5:8 says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." I think that this one is in particular a powerful one for us to pay attention to because Jesus talks about the heart a lot. And one of the things that Jesus says a little later on in Matthew is that it's out of the heart that all of the things that we do come out of. And so, if we're wondering whether or not we have a pure heart, if we're following this beatitude that Jesus encourages us to, then we're actually able to get a good gauge of what our heart is about. Because we're going to be able to look at the things we do this week and ask ourselves, are they coming from a pure heart or are they coming from a selfish one that is focused on what we want and not what God wants? If we see that we are full of lying, if we're full of strife, if we're full of lusting, then our heart is not having the mindset that it should. Instead, it's following after sin. Furthermore, what is it that your mind goes to when it doesn't have anything to think about, when it's on neutral, when you're not paying attention? You know, a lot of times whenever we say something in the heat of a moment, whether it be us making a joke that maybe is a little inappropriate, or we say something out of anger and we want to go back to that person and tell them, I didn't mean that. What happens in those moments when we're not paying attention and when we do things that we know are not pure in heart, what that tells us is the default setting of our heart. The way that it thinks, the way that it's going through and processing everything. And so if we're seeing that our heart is not being pure because of the actions that are happening in our day-to-day lives, then we need to stop, slow down, and go back to the root of the problem and focus on our heart. And when we talk about this idea of being pure in heart, we're not just talking about purity in the form of compliance, of, well, just don't do anything evil. And make sure you go through your checklist and did you lie today? Did you steal? No? Okay, well good. You've been pure today. That's not what Jesus is talking about when he says being pure in heart. Instead, what Jesus is focusing on here, again, talking about being pure in heart, is a full devotion to God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul. And so when God wants us to follow him, he's looking for us not to just give over a portion of our life, but instead everything. And so, again, if we find that our actions are not being pure in heart, it's not just that we're not doing good enough. What we really want to go back and examine is if we're truly devoted to God. Are we putting God first? Are we letting him guide our actions? Are we becoming more like him? And that's really an important question because this idea of being pure in heart is really preparation for heaven. We know that God does not let impure things come into heaven. And so, do we really want that relationship with God? Do we want to be pure like him? If we're not willing to commit wholeheartedly to the purity that he wants for us, what does that say about the relationship that we want with him? We need to be very careful about that answer, because if we say, you know, Lord, I'm okay with us having a relationship as long as I don't have to give up everything, as long as I don't have to be completely pure with my full heart, then we can have a relationship. But if you're asking me to sacrifice everything to you, Lord, I'm not going to do that. You need to understand that the Lord will respect your decision. He understands that you don't want the fullness of the relationship that he wants with you. But that also means that you're rejecting the fullness of that relationship, not just now, but also in heaven. God wants us to want him with all of our heart, to be like him, and to have the same purity that he himself has. Is that what we want? Is that what our heart is telling us? Do our actions show that our heart is aligned with God? Those are the things that we should be thinking about this week. I hope this lesson blesses you in your walk in his kingdom.